All right. So, first day of the year here. Yay. But we are getting close to the end of the semester, is kind of the big update. You might have heard about it in first hour or known about it, but we are getting very, very close here to finishing this semester up. So, we don't have final exams, but basically what that means is whatever grade you have at the end of the semester with whatever we do to finish out the year uh, or finish out the semester is what you're going to have on your final grade. So keep that in mind that we are very, very close. We're kind of running out of time here to get any late work in. If you had anything that you needed to get turned in, the end of the semester is 2 weeks away. I believe it's the 20th or 21st is like our last day. So keep that in mind. That we're fast approaching that to make sure you get anything turned in if you need to. So yeah. Otherwise, the other big update here is the project. So over break, we had taken a look at the different, or before break, we had talked about China and the a few different dynasties there. So the project is due on Friday. So I hadn't set a due date for that yet, but I am setting one right now, and that's going to be this Friday. So make sure you're getting that turned in. I know a lot of people worked on it over break and probably already have it done, which is awesome. But if you haven't yet, you still have this week here to get that done and turned in. Make sure you ask me any questions if you have any, and kind of get that done and out of the way. So, yeah, so that's the other big update. Otherwise, our learning target here for today, like I said, we're moving on to a new topic that we're only going to touch on very briefly here today and probably on Wednesday, and that's going to be Japan in the Middle Ages. And today we're going to look at their feudal system. So, our learning target, we will compare and contrast the feudal systems of Japan and Europe. So, a little bit of review with the European feudal system, and we'll kind of see how it's similar or different to the one that we'll see in Japan. All right. So before we get into that new topic here, are there any questions that anybody has about the end of the semester, about the project, about anything really at all here? Okay. Cool, cool. So if there are no questions, when is the test going to be? We'll talk about that on Wednesday and on Friday. Still haven't sorted out exactly how I want to do it yet is the thing. So I'm kind of waiting to see because they said later in the week they'll let us know what next week is going to look like, whether we'll be virtual or remote or hybrid or whatever. So kind of waiting on that to see about that. But but yeah, make sure you have it done before Friday, and you'll be fine. So good question though. Okay. Cool, cool. So we are going to be doing a pair deck here today, then, as we kind of review what the European feudal system looked like, so that we can compare it to what it looked like in Japan. So I'll go ahead and copy a link here and put that in chat, or the code is up on my screen still. So we'll give you guys a minute here to log into that. Hopefully it works. Pair deck didn't work for first hour. I'm hoping things are fixed now. Okay, cool. Let's see. Looks like people are getting in, so hopefully it's working. Hmm. All right, so probably most of us are in here, so let's go ahead and get started. So, as I mentioned, we're talking about the feudal system in Japan. So, Japan, an island nation just off the coast of China here. And what we're going to see is that they're going to have a feudal system that is very similar to the one in Europe. So, we're going to start with a quick review of what that feudal system looked like. So, starting with a little drag the icons thing here. So, you're dragging the numbered icons, number 1 through 4, putting 1 on the person with the most power, 4 on the person with the least power, and kind of ordering them. So, what order did the feudal system go in here in Europe? So, I'll give you a second here to drag those around. Hopefully, this is a review. Whoa! It overlaid all of them at once. Interesting. Well, today I learned, huh? Okay. Well, looks like we're mostly getting it. Maybe I'll have to fix this so it doesn't look so ridiculous when I show the answers here. But hopefully, this was a bit of a review, knowing who has the most power in Europe and the least power in Europe. And it's essentially going to go 1 here at the bottom. The kings have the most power, so your number 1 should be down here. Number 2 would be the lords. They have the second most power. Number 3 would be the knights. And then number 4 at the bottom, actually, of the pyramid would be the peasants. So we talked about this quite a bit here. We talked about the jobs that they had, which we'll look at here in a second. But we had the singular king there at the top of this European feudal system, at the top of this pyramid, followed by the nobles, then the knights, and then the peasants there at the bottom. So good. Hopefully that was a review. And then here is another review. We're doing a match the roles here. So it says to draw lines to match these up. Once again, hopefully this is a review. We have the king, lord, knight, and peasant on the left side, and then the jobs that they were given here on the right. So go ahead and connect the lines here. All right. Question mark. I don't know why you got a question mark. You got good. Looks like we're mostly getting it. Ooh, different colors even. How fancy. Getting that. Good, good, good. All right, good. So let's go ahead and look at the answers here. So first of all, we had the king line goes down here to owns all land and enforces laws. So remember, the king is kind of the law and order in Europe. He creates these laws that people have to follow within all of the land that he owns, and then he gives out that land to people in exchange for that oath of loyalty. And particularly, the king gives those fiefs or plots of land to the lords, so the person right underneath him. He gives them to the lords because they control the militaries. They have or they turn around and give that land as fiefs to knights to live on, and so therefore the king can control his own or get a military by having control over the lords. We then have the knight class. They are the warriors. They protect the land that they're given. That was kind of their whole purpose on these fiefs. And then you have the peasants who farm the land to provide the food. And so that was kind of the basic structure of society in Europe during the Middle Ages. Now, what we're going to see is that in Japan, they develop a very similar feudal system, and they also develop it at about the same time, roughly. So the Japanese feudal system starts around the 1100s, which is towards the end of the Middle Ages in Europe. But they were mostly isolated from the rest of the world. So it's interesting that we get a system that is very similar to Europe's, despite the fact that they don't have a lot of contact with them. It's essentially just the fact that it worked out for the people living there as well in Japan. So we're going to go kind of step by step here as we fill in the different roles of the Japanese feudal system here on the left, the description in the middle, and the European kind of feudal equivalent on the right. So what's interesting here is the fact that you'll see that in Japan, we have many more distinctions. We'll have many more different classes that people fall into, and we'll kind of have rough equivalencies here on the right of what they were in Europe. So we'll start here with the very top of the feudal system in Japan is the emperor. So the emperor is this what's called a figurehead ruler, which means he's not going to have a whole lot of power, but he is kind of a symbol of the country, a symbol of what they represent. So there's a question mark here because it's asking you, what do you think is the European equivalent here to an emperor? The ruler who is the symbol of power. So which of our four European feudal classes makes sense to fill in as the same or equivalent to an emperor? All right, we got a couple people saying lords, couple people, looks like most people saying king. Good. And so when it comes to this one, it would most likely be the king who we're going to see as the equivalent here. So the emperor in Japan, just like in Europe, most of the power was on the local level. And so the emperor does have some power, but especially more so in Japan, the emperor is what's called a figurehead ruler because he has no true power. He kind of just stands as a symbol of the country. He doesn't have a whole lot of responsibilities. Unlike the king in Europe, the emperor does not control the military directly. They don't have as many responsibilities. They don't create laws. They don't try and enforce them. The emperor really doesn't do a whole lot in Japan because most of the power is going to go to the next class just underneath them. So as far as an equivalence goes here, it's most similar to a king as kind of being the singular ruler that's on the top, but they don't have as much power nearly as the king in Europe. So instead, we'll see in Japan that most of the true ruling power is going to fall into this second class, which is a group of people called the shoguns. These are the true ruling power because they make and enforce the laws. They are also in control of kind of the larger portions of the military. So make and enforce laws and control the military. Which European feudal class do you think is equivalent to a shogun? All right, let's see our responses here. We've got king, lord, king, lords, lords, kings, lords, lords, kings, lords. All right, looks like we're mixed between kings and lords. We have one that says or knights as well, but it looks like most of us are kings or lords. And it's kind of a trick question because it's kind of both, right? It might have been hard to pick between the two because we have 7 classes here on the right to fill in, and we have 7 on the left here. So a shogun is kind of a combination here of a king and a lord in terms of being equivalent to Europe. So they were definitely more powerful than the lords in Europe, while still being very similar to them, right? So they still have kind of local control over these much larger areas of land. Think of shoguns as kind of being in control of almost like their own states. So they have more power than lords in Europe because they create and enforce laws, but they're also very similar because they are also kind of in control of these larger portions of the military and kind of maintain that control. So shoguns are the most powerful people in Japan, despite the fact that they are kind of coming in second here on their feudal chart. Good. So next is a group of people called the daimyo, and these are the actual landowners. So these are the people that own kind of portions of land. They also allow the warrior classes to live on these plots of land, but they are the ones who kind of give their loyalty to the shogun. So the shogun controls the larger kind of military versus the daimyo, who controls much smaller portions of it, while also maintaining the land that they live on and giving it out to the warrior class underneath. So we've got another equivalent here. Which European feudal system group do we think that they belong or are most similar to as landowners and as controllers of a military? All right, so we've got knights / lords. We've got lord, peasants, lords, knights and lords, knights. Looks like most of us are somewhere in between lords and knights. So the daimyo are most similar to the lords. They're kind of a more direct comparison here between Europe and Japan. As the landowners, they are not working the land, so they are not the peasants, right? So they don't work the land, they just own it. And they're also in control of the militaries. They are not a part of the military. They are not the warrior class. They are the smaller military leaders. So they give their loyalty to the shogun. And kind of control these smaller portions of the military, and they give the warrior class land to live on, and that warrior class is in charge of protecting it, which leads us to our next class here. So we have the warriors who serve the daimyo / lord and protect the land that they are given. And so for this one, we have a pretty direct comparison. You might know what this is called in Japan, or it's going to sound familiar, I'm sure, once I show you what it is. So what do you think it's called in Japan, and what class does it in Europe? All right, let's see here. Got knights / samurai, Knights, knights, samurai, knights, good. Knights, samurai. Japan is samurai. Europe, it's knights. Good, good, good. Yeah, good. So I'm glad you've definitely heard this before. You've probably heard of samurai, and they are pretty much a direct comparison to the knights in Europe. They serve the same kind of purpose, right? They're the dedicated warriors. They serve their whole lives, right? It's kind of what they're born to do. They give their loyalty to a daimyo, and therefore in direct comparison or indirectly to a shogun as well. And just like in Europe, the knights had to follow these codes of chivalry, right? These strict law codes that said if you're going to be a knight, you have to kind of be uh, uh, this important. You have to do all these important things. In Japan, they followed something called Bushido, which is the way of the warrior. But we'll see that samurai also have similar problems to knights, such as lack of wars to fight. So sometimes they'll fight amongst themselves. The Bushido kind of helped kind of stop some of that. But yeah, samurai very very similar to the knights in Europe in terms of their role in this society. All right, so we filled in, or I went ahead and filled in the last three all at once here, because we had the same class here at the bottom of society in Europe. We had the peasants, but in Japan, what we'll see is that they split up their kind of lower three classes in, or their lower class into three parts. So we have the peasants, the artisans, and the merchants. So in European feudalism, there was no distinction between these peasant jobs, right? It didn't matter what you did. If you were not a knight, if you were not a lord or a king, then you were a peasant. That's just kind of the class you fell into. There was nothing you could do about it. It didn't matter if you were a farmer or a seller or in a guild or anything like that. But in Japan, they split it up into these three classes in terms of who they saw as the most important. So the number one most important kind of class, as far as the bottom of their society goes, but the number one was the peasants, who were the farmers. They saw this as important because food is necessary for survival, right? Everybody needs food within the system. And so, because there's also very little farmland in Japan, it's not the largest country, and there's also quite a few mountains. There's not the most land to work with. Farming was very, very important and necessary. And so, these were seen as kind of the most important people of the bottom of this feudal system. Second were the artisans. These were craftsmen. Think of these like people in Europe who joined guilds. So these were people that created goods, filled in the skills that were necessary, right? So we had people that make weapons and pottery, but also things like clothing, things like fishing would go in the craftsmen as and artisans as well. Basically, any sort of job that took a skill that you had to create something with or learn how to do would fall into this craftsman category. And the number three were the merchants, and this was kind of the bottom of the lowest part of society here, because according to the people of Japan, it didn't take any skill to sell things. You were taking something that someone else did, so someone else's product that they took the time to create, and you were selling it and trying to kind of make money by selling it for more than what you bought it for. And that was not seen as something that was honorable. So being a merchant at the bottom of society here in the Japanese feudal system. So that's how they divided their peasant classes up. They did not have serfdom in the same way that Europe did. They just had these three classes here at the bottom. So on the right here, we have our completely filled in kind of chart with the European feudal system on the right, the Japanese feudal system on the left, and then our descriptions in the middle. So our final question here, what are some similarities between the Japanese and European feudal systems? Second, what are the major differences? And then third is the tougher part. Do your best on this last question here, but what problems did we see in Europe's feudal system that you think could also happen in Japan? So go ahead and take a minute or two here. I'll leave this open for a second. go ahead and answer those questions, and then we'll finish things out in a moment. All right, cool. So, looking at this final question here, hopefully some similarities you saw is that there's definitely kind of the same sort of structure in society, right? Of having more powerful people at the top, the peasants at the bottom. Definitely kind of this exchange of land is very important here. In terms of similarities, they also have some kind of direct comparisons between some of the classes, right? Like the daimyo and the lords are very similar, the samurai and the knights are very similar. But the major difference is kind of being the fact that there's more distinctions within the Japanese feudal class system, right? There's more classes people fall into versus just the four here in Europe. Another major difference is the person with the most power is the king in Europe versus in Japan. It's the shogun, the one that has the most power here. And then some problems that we saw in Europe's feudal system. Definitely kind of the lower classes not being represented as fairly kind of in society, right? So peasants just kind of making do with what they have. We also had problems with the knight class that we'll see with the samurai, and then the lack of wars that we'll see kind of affect the shoguns as well as they try to find wars for these people to fight in. So lots of different things here. You might have had other things too. I hope you did. That's just kind of some that I'm thinking of here as we finish up for today. So good. All right. Head back to this. Okay. So that is where we're going to finish up for today. So just a couple of reminders here. Make sure that the project is getting done and completed and turned in before Friday. That Chinese timelines project is due on Friday. So if you have any questions, please email me. I'll be sure to help you out. We'll get that done and out of the way. Like I mentioned earlier in class, we'll kind of talk more about what the test is or is going to look like on Wednesday or on Friday. So I'll make sure to update you guys on that. But yeah, otherwise we'll wrap things up there. So I hope you guys have a good rest of your Monday, and I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Thank you. Have a good one.